Keynotes provide a consistent way of annotating drawings to identify model elements, detail components, or materials. Keynotes use tags and data from an external text file that you associate with an element, component, or material. I'll zoom in and select the cooling tower. In the Properties palette, I'll click Edit Type. In the Type Properties dialog, there's a parameter called Keynote. This field is currently blank. I'll click in that field to make it active and then click the button. As soon as I do, Revit displays a dialog telling me that it is unable to locate the Keynote data file. Before you can associate keynotes with elements in your project, you must tell Revit where to find its keynotes. Keynotes are stored in special ASCII text files. Revit actually ships with several different keynote data files, and you can modify these and create your own. You can have different keynote data files for different projects, but only one file can be associated with the project. Once keynotes have been placed in a project, if the information in the keynote file is modified, all of the keynotes will update appropriately. I'll click Close and then click Cancel to close the Type Properties dialog. Before I can add any keynotes, I have to associate a keynote data file with this project. On the Annotate ribbon, I'll expand the Tag panel and click Keynote Settings. Revit displays the Keynoting Settings dialog. Realize that the path type can be set to Absolute, Relative, or at Library Locations. I'll select at Library Locations and then click the Browse button. I'll navigate to the Imperial Library and scroll down. As you can see, there are several Keynote data files. Of course, if you're using metric units, you would look for these files in the metric library. But you can use your own Keynote files. For this exercise, so that we all use the same Keynote file, I'll click Cancel to return back to the Keynoting Settings dialog. Select the Relative Path Type radio button, and then click Browse again. Notice that I've got two Keynote files created just for this lesson. Select either the Imperial or metric file as appropriate, and then click Open. Now that a Keynote file has been assigned, in the Numbering Method area, you can choose whether to number by Keynote or by sheet. I'll leave this set to by Keynote and click OK. Now, I'll select the cooling tower again and click the Edit Type button. In the Type Properties dialog, I'll click in the Keynote field and then click the button. Now, Revit displays the Keynotes dialog, and I can select the proper keynote to apply to the cooling tower. Instead, I'll click Cancel and then click Cancel again to close the Type Properties dialog. Then, I'll click in the view to deselect the cooling tower. You can also select the appropriate keynote when you place a keynote tag. On the Annotate ribbon, in the Tag panel, I'll expand the Keynote Split button and choose Element Keynote. On the Options bar, notice that the tag can be horizontal or vertical. I can include a leader, and the leader can have a free end or an attached end. In the Type selector, I can choose the type of keynote tag I want to use. I'll select Keynote Number, Boxed, Small. When I move the cursor over the cooling tower, I can see the keynote box. I'll click once to place the leader, click a second time to place the elbow, and click one more time to place the keynote. Since I had not associated a keynote with the cooling tower, Revit displays the same keynote dialog we saw before. I'll choose Note M1 and click OK. When I do, the keynote immediately fills in. I'll click Modify And then, in the type selector, I'll change the keynote tag to Keynote Text. See how the keynote immediately changes? I'll deselect the tag, select the cooling tower, and then click Edit Type to open its Type Properties dialog. As you can see, the keynote has now been filled in. This keynote is based on the cooling tower model object. You can also place keynotes based on materials, but those type of keynotes are not used very much for MEP. I'll click Cancel to close the Type Properties dialog. You can also place user-specified keynotes. User keynotes do not pick up keynotes from a model element or material, so you can use them to assign any keynote you want. On the Annotate ribbon, in the Tag panel, I'll expand the Keynote Split button and choose User Keynote. I'll select the cooling tower. As soon as I place the keynote, Revit displays the Keynotes dialog. Even though the cooling tower already had a keynote assigned, I can place a user keynote to include an additional keynote. I'll choose Note M3 and click OK. Then I'll click Modify to end the command.